Step away from the counter. We don't serve people like you here." The sentence didn't echo. It sliced clean through the quiet like it had been practiced, sharpened, and waiting for someone exactly like her. Vanessa Cole didn't move. Not an inch. At 9:42 a.m., inside the polished marble lobby of First Dominion Bank, everything else seemed to pause around her. The soft hum of printers, the low murmur of wealth and routine, the quiet confidence of money moving unseen, all of it faded under the weight of that one sentence. She stood in line like any other customer. Dark denim, simple blouse, no designer logos, no signal of status, just presence. And somehow, that was the problem. The teller behind the counter, a young woman with perfectly pressed sleeves and a smile that had already disappeared, leaned back slightly, as if distance alone could confirm suspicion. "ID," she said flatly, not a request but a demand. Vanessa slid it forward without a word. The card barely touched the counter before the teller's expression shifted again, this time from doubt to something colder, something more certain. "This doesn't look right," she added, louder now, just enough for the man in the tailored suit behind Vanessa to hear. He did. His eyes flicked up, curious. Vanessa noticed, but her face didn't change. She had seen this before. Not once. Not twice. Enough times to recognize the pattern before it fully formed. The teller turned her head slightly. "Ma'am, I'm going to need additional verification. This account activity is unusual." The word hung in the air like a quiet accusation. Unusual. Not illegal. Not wrong. Just not expected. Not from someone who looked like her. Vanessa exhaled slowly, steady, controlled. "Is that your policy?" she asked, her voice calm. Almost too calm. "Or your assumption?" The question didn't raise her volume, but it shifted something in the room. The man behind her leaned back half an inch. Another customer, seated near the glass office, glanced over. The teller hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. Enough to reveal uncertainty beneath authority. That's when the manager stepped in. He didn't rush. He didn't need to. Mid-40s, crisp tie, confidence worn like a uniform. He approached with the kind of presence that assumed control before speaking a word. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, though his eyes were already locked on Vanessa, already deciding. The teller straightened. "She's trying to access an account with questionable verification." The manager nodded slowly, like he'd heard this story before and already knew how it ended. He turned to Vanessa. "Ma'am, we take fraud very seriously. If you can't properly verify your identity, we'll have to ask you to step aside." Step aside. Not leave. Not yet. But close enough to feel it coming. Vanessa looked at him, really looked this time. And for the first time since she walked in, something shifted, not in her posture, not in her tone, but in her eyes. Not anger. Not frustration. Recognition. Like a door quietly closing behind a memory she'd already lived through. The room held its breath without realizing it. And Vanessa Cole still hadn't raised her voice. The manager did not wait for her answer. He never planned to. He reached for her identification card, lifting it between two fingers like it required distance, like it carried something more than plastic and ink. He glanced at it briefly, then handed it back without really seeing it. "We are going to need a secondary form of identification," he said, his tone measured but firm, the kind of voice that expected compliance, not conversation. Vanessa took the card back slowly, her fingers steady, her expression unchanged. Around them, the room had shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough. Conversations softened. Heads tilted. Attention gathered in quiet pockets. The man in the tailored suit no longer pretended not to watch. A woman seated near the window lowered her phone slightly, her eyes narrowing as she followed every word. Vanessa could feel it, the weight of observation pressing in from every direction, but she did not acknowledge it. She kept her focus forward, locked on the man who believed he controlled the moment. "You already have my identification," she said, her voice even, controlled, deliberate. The manager offered a tight smile that did not reach his eyes. "We have procedures," he replied. "And right now, your account activity is raising concerns." There it was again. Not an accusation. Not officially. Just enough implication to reshape the room around her. Suspicion without proof. Authority without accountability. Vanessa tilted her head slightly, studying him the way someone studies a problem they already know how to solve. "What exactly is the concern?" she asked. The manager hesitated for a fraction of a second, then recovered. Large movement requests. Irregular timing. It does not match the profile. Profile. The word landed heavier than the rest. It was no longer about numbers. It was about expectation. About who was allowed to move money like that, and who was not. The teller shifted beside him, emboldened now. We see this all the time, she added, her voice louder, inviting the room into the narrative. People try to access accounts that are not theirs. A quiet murmur rippled somewhere behind Vanessa. Not agreement. Not quite disagreement either. Just tension, stretching. Vanessa let the silence sit for a moment. She did not rush to defend herself. She did not raise her voice. Instead, she placed both hands lightly on the counter, grounding herself in the space they were trying to take from her. Run the account, she said simply. The manager's smile tightened. That is exactly what we are trying to do, he replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. A younger employee at the far terminal glanced up, his fingers hovering over the keyboard as if waiting for permission that had not been given. He looked from the manager to Vanessa, uncertainty written across his face. He knew something was off. He just did not know what to do about it. Vanessa noticed him. Of course she did. She noticed everything. The hesitation, the discomfort, the quiet realization forming in real time. But she said nothing. Not yet. The manager crossed his arms slightly, a subtle shift that closed the space even more. Until we verify your identity, he said, louder now, projecting authority into the growing audience. You will not be able to proceed with any transactions. Not proceed. Not allowed. The distinction mattered. Vanessa exhaled. Slowly, her gaze steady, unwavering. She had heard different words before, in different rooms, in different years. But they always meant the same thing. You do not belong here. The memory flickered at the edge of her mind, not fully formed, just enough to remind her that this moment was not new. Just repeated. Refined. Disguised as policy. She straightened slightly, not in defiance, but in clarity. And for the first time, the air in the room felt charged, like something unseen had just been set in motion, something quiet, controlled, and far more powerful than anyone in that lobby realized. The silence did not break. It stretched. It tightened. It pressed against every surface in the room until even the smallest movement felt louder than it should. Vanessa Cole stood there, still as ever, but something beneath that stillness had changed. Not visibly, not in a way the manager could name, but it was there. The kind of shift that happens right before a storm decides it is done waiting. The younger employee at the terminal swallowed hard and finally spoke, his voice careful, almost apologetic. Sir, I can run the account now. It will take just a few seconds. The manager did not turn. He did not need to. Not yet, he said, cutting the suggestion cleanly. We follow protocol. Protocol again. Always that word. Clean. Safe. Untouchable. Vanessa let out a slow breath, her fingers lifting slightly from the counter before settling back down. You keep saying protocol, she said, her tone even, almost reflective. So tell me something. Does your protocol apply to everyone, or just to people you decide need it? The question did not come with heat. That was what made it land harder. The manager's jaw tightened, just enough to reveal the crack beneath his control. Ma'am, I am trying to assist you, he replied, his voice now carrying a sharper edge. But if you continue to question our procedures, we may have to escalate this situation. Escalate. Another word that shifted responsibility without taking any. The woman by the window straightened in her chair, her phone now fully in her hand. She was not hiding it anymore. A quiet click echoed as she started recording. Across the room, the man in the tailored suit exhaled slowly, his expression no longer neutral. People were no longer just watching. They were choosing sides, even if they did not realize it yet. Vanessa noticed every detail. The lifted phone, the shifting posture, the way the younger employee's hands hovered again over the keyboard, waiting for a permission that still was not coming. The system was revealing itself in real time. Not just the bank, the people inside it. The manager leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice as if that would contain the situation. If you cannot provide additional verification, he said, we will have to restrict access to this account until further notice. There it was. The quiet threat. Not loud enough to sound aggressive, but clear enough to remove control. Vanessa tilted her head just slightly, her eyes steady on his. Restrict access, she repeated softly, as if testing the weight of the words. Then she nodded once. Not in agreement. In confirmation. The memory surfaced fully this time. A smaller branch. Years ago, a younger version of herself standing in a line just like this one. Same tone. Same assumptions. Different faces. Same outcome. Back then, she had explained. She had justified. She had tried to make them understand. It had not mattered. It never did. That version of her was gone now. The room felt different again. Not louder. Not chaotic. Just heavier. Like something invisible had entered the space and taken position right beside her. Vanessa reached into her bag slowly, deliberately. The movement drew every eye in the room without a single word. She pulled out her phone, her grip steady, her expression unchanged. The manager watched closely now, suspicion mixing with something new. Uncertainty. Vanessa did not look at him as she unlocked the screen. She did not look at the teller. She did not look at the people watching. She looked straight ahead, her voice calm, precise, and unmistakably controlled as she spoke into the phone. Log this interaction, she said. A pause. Just enough for the words to settle. Then, without raising her tone, without adding emphasis, she continued. And initiate protocol black. The air in the room did not move, but everything in it did. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. No alarms. No sudden movement. Just silence, stretched so thin it felt like it might snap. The manager let out a short breath, almost a laugh, shaking his head as if he had just witnessed something mildly amusing instead of something deliberate. Protocol black, he repeated, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. Ma'am, this is a bank, not a movie. A few quiet chuckles followed, scattered, uncertain, more nervous than confident. The teller glanced at him, then back at Vanessa, her earlier certainty flickering just enough to show doubt beginning to form. Vanessa did not respond to the comment. She did not defend the words. She did not explain them. She simply lowered her phone slightly, her posture unchanged, her presence steady, like someone who had already moved past the moment everyone else was still trying to understand. Across the room, the younger employee's screen blinked once. Then again, his fingers, still hovering above the keyboard, froze midair. A small notification appeared in the corner of his monitor. Then another. His eyes narrowed as he read, his expression shifting from confusion to something sharper, something closer to realization. Sir, he said quietly, almost under his breath. The manager did not look at him. Not now, he replied, dismissing the interruption without turning. But the employee did not stop this time. Sir, the system is updating. That word landed differently. Updating. Not failing. Not glitching. Something intentional. The manager's eyes flicked toward the terminal for the first time. Just a glance. Just enough to notice that the screen no longer looked the way it had a moment ago. Tabs were closing. Access panels were refreshing. Permissions were shifting in real time. Subtle. Controlled. But undeniable. The teller stepped back half an inch, her hands no longer resting comfortably on the counter. What is happening? She asked, her voice lower now, the confidence gone. No one answered her. Because no one in that room knew. Except one person. Vanessa Cole stood exactly where she had been, her gaze steady, her expression calm, as if the environment around her was finally aligning with something she had already set in motion long before she walked through those doors. The woman near the window leaned forward slightly, her phone still recording, capturing every second of the shift. This is not normal, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. The man in the tailored suit straightened fully now, no longer pretending to be uninvolved. Even he could feel it. The balance in the room had changed. The manager took a step toward the terminal, his composure tightening as he tried to reassert control over something he could no longer see clearly. It is probably just a temporary system issue, he said quickly, more for himself than for anyone else. Continue standard procedure. But his voice lacked the authority it carried just moments ago. Because the system was not stopping. Another notification appeared. Then another. Internal access flags. Compliance alerts. Live audit indicators. Words that did not belong in routine operations began appearing on screens across the branch. The younger employee leaned back slightly, his eyes fixed on the monitor. Sir, this is not local, he said, his voice barely above a whisper now. This is coming from corporate. That word did not echo. It settled. Heavy. Final. The manager's posture stiffened. Slowly, Almost reluctantly, he turned back toward Vanessa. And for the first time since this began, he did not speak immediately. Because something in her stillness no longer looked passive. It looked precise, intentional, like every second that had passed was exactly where it was supposed to be. Vanessa met his gaze without blinking. And in that moment, without raising her voice, without moving a single step forward, she had already taken control of the entire room. The word corporate did not fade. It settled into the room like weight pressing down on every surface, every breath, every assumption that had been made just minutes earlier. The manager straightened, adjusting his tie out of habit, but the motion no longer carried confidence. It carried hesitation. His eyes flicked once more toward the terminal, then back to Vanessa, as if trying to connect two realities that no longer aligned. "What exactly did you do?" he asked, his voice lower now, stripped of its earlier edge. Vanessa did not answer immediately. She let the question exist in the space between them, let it stretch just enough for everyone else to feel it too. Around them, the bank was no longer operating the way it had when she walked in. Screens refreshed again. A soft alert tone echoed from somewhere behind the counter. Another employee turned toward their monitor, confusion written across their face as access prompts replaced routine interfaces. The teller took a small step back, her earlier posture gone entirely now. "I cannot log into the verification system," she said, her voice tight, controlled but unmistakably shaken. The younger employee shook his head slowly, eyes still fixed on his screen. "It is not just verification," he added. "It is everything. Internal access is being restricted." Restricted, the same word the manager had used moments ago, now turned back on the system itself. Vanessa's gaze remained steady, her expression unchanged, but there was something new beneath it now. Not satisfaction, not pride, precision, like every piece had just fallen into place exactly where it was meant to. The manager exhaled slowly, trying to regain control of a situation that was no longer his to manage. "This branch operates independently," he said, more firmly now, reaching for authority he could still recognize. "Whatever this is, it will be resolved shortly." But even as he spoke, another notification appeared on the main terminal. This one larger. This one impossible to ignore. The younger employee leaned forward slightly, reading it out loud without meaning to. "Live compliance audit initiated. Executive oversight engaged." The words did not need explanation. They carried their own gravity. The woman by the window lowered her phone just enough to look directly at Vanessa now, her expression no longer curious but focused, like she was witnessing something far bigger than a simple disagreement at a bank counter. The man in the tailored suit shifted his stance again, his attention fully locked on the unfolding moment. Vanessa finally moved. Not forward, not back, just enough to pick up her identification card from the counter and hold it lightly between her fingers. She looked at it for a brief second, then back at the manager. "You asked for verification," she said quietly. The manager did not respond. He could not, because whatever answer he expected no longer fit the reality forming around him. Vanessa continued, her voice calm, controlled, but carrying a weight that did not need volume. "You question my identity," she added. A pause, just long enough for the room to lean in without realizing it. "So I verified yours." The sentence did not rise. It did not sharpen. It landed exactly where it needed to. The manager's expression shifted, not fully understanding, but no longer certain of anything he had said before. Behind him, another system alert sounded. Louder this time, more final. And in that moment, every person in that room understood something had changed. Not just the situation, the balance, the control, the assumption of who belonged and who did not. And Vanessa Cole stood at the center of it, exactly where she had always intended to be. The words hung in the air longer than anything else that morning. Not loud, not aggressive, but undeniable. The manager blinked once, as if trying to process a sentence that did not follow the script he had been running since the moment Vanessa walked in. "That does not make any sense," he said finally, his voice tighter now, less certain, like he was speaking more to himself than to her. But the room had already moved past his understanding. Another alert echoed from behind the counter. This one sharper, more urgent. The younger employee leaned closer to the screen, his eyes scanning rapidly. "Sir, access levels are being overridden," he said, his voice no longer hesitant. It was clear now. Something bigger was happening, and it was not slowing down. The teller stepped back again, her hands no longer pretending to be busy. I cannot even pull up customer profiles, she said, her voice barely steady. Everything is locked behind executive clearance. Executive. That word landed heavier than the last. The manager's posture shifted again, this time not toward control, but toward uncertainty. He turned fully toward the main terminal, his movements sharper now, urgency replacing confidence. Override it, he said quickly. Use branch authorization. The younger employee did not move. He did not even touch the keyboard. I cannot, he replied. Branch authorization has been suspended. Suspended. The same system that once gave him authority had just removed it. In real time. In front of everyone. The silence that followed was no longer thin. It was dense. Full. Every person in the lobby could feel it pressing in. The woman recording lowered her phone slightly again, not because she lost interest, but because she needed to see this with her own eyes. The man in the tailored suit shifted closer, his attention no longer passive, his expression now openly focused. Vanessa stood exactly where she had been, her presence unchanged, but the space around her had transformed completely. She was no longer the one being questioned. She was the center of something unfolding, something precise and controlled. The manager turned back to her slowly, his face no longer composed, his voice searching for ground that no longer existed. Who are you? He asked. It was the first honest question he had asked all morning. Vanessa held his gaze, steady, unblinking. For a moment, she did not answer. Not because she did not have one, but because the room was not ready for it yet. Instead, she reached for her phone again, lifting it slightly, as if confirming something only she could see. A soft vibration. A message received. Her eyes flicked down for half a second, then back up. That was all it took. The shift was complete. You initiated restrictions on my access, she said calmly. Her voice measured, each word placed exactly where it needed to be. So the system responded accordingly. The manager shook his head slightly, trying to reject what he could not yet understand. That is not how this works, he said quickly. Vanessa tilted her head just a fraction, her expression unchanged. No, she replied softly. That is exactly how it works. Behind him, another alert appeared. Larger this time. Impossible to ignore. The younger employee leaned back slowly, his voice barely above a whisper as he read it. Executive command confirmed. No one moved. No one spoke. Because in that moment, the system had spoken for her. And the room was finally beginning to understand that Vanessa Cole had never been trying to prove who she was. She had been waiting for the system to prove who they were. The phrase executive command confirmed did not fade into the background like the others. It stayed. It anchored itself in the room, heavy and undeniable, like a final piece locking into place. The manager stood still, his eyes flicking once more to the terminal, then back to Vanessa, as if hoping the system would correct itself, as if this entire moment was some kind of temporary glitch that would restore his control. But nothing reset. Nothing softened. The system did not hesitate. It continued. Another notification appeared, this time stretching across the entire screen, visible even from where the customers stood. Internal audit in progress. All actions logged. The younger employee swallowed hard, his voice quieter now, but clearer than it had been all morning. Sir, this is being monitored live. The words shifted something deeper than confusion. They introduced consequence. The teller's hand moved instinctively toward the keyboard again, then stopped midway, as if she no longer trusted her own permission to act. Who was monitoring it? She asked, her voice barely holding together. The younger employee did not answer right away. He read further, his eyes widening slightly before he spoke again. Executive board access. The room did not react all at once. It unraveled slowly. The woman by the window lowered her phone completely now, her attention no longer split between recording and understanding. She was fully present, watching the moment unfold in real time. The man in the tailored suit let out a quiet breath, not in surprise, but in recognition. He had seen power before, just not like this. Not this controlled. Not this quiet. The manager's shoulders tightened, his posture no longer open, no longer certain. He took a small step back from the counter, as if distance might give him clarity, but it only made the shift more visible. This is unnecessary, he said, his voice attempting authority, but landing somewhere closer to defense. We are simply following procedure. Vanessa did not interrupt him. She let him speak. Let him try to reclaim something that was already gone. When he finished, she tilted her head slightly, her gaze steady, her tone unchanged. You were, she said calmly. A pause. Just long enough for the distinction to settle. Now you are being reviewed for it. The sentence did not rise. It did not need to. Behind him, another alert sounded. This one sharper. Final. The younger employee leaned back in his chair, his hands fully away from the keyboard now. Sir, your access credentials, he hesitated, then continued. They have been downgraded. The word landed like a quiet collapse. Not dramatic, not loud, but irreversible. The manager froze. Not physically, but internally. The kind of stillness that comes when control slips away in real time and there is nothing left to hold on to. The teller stepped back again, her eyes moving between Vanessa and the screen, trying to reconcile the two, trying to understand how the person she had dismissed minutes ago now stood at the center of something the entire system was responding to. Vanessa finally moved her hand from the counter, picking up her phone again, glancing at it briefly before lowering it. Another message received. Another confirmation. Everything was aligning. She looked back at the manager, her expression unchanged, but the meaning behind it unmistakable now. You asked me to prove who I am, she said softly. So I gave you the only proof that matters. She paused, not for effect, but for clarity. Authority does not come from a title on a desk, she continued. It comes from who the system answers to. The room did not breathe, because in that moment, the answer was no longer a question, and every person standing there could feel it. The system was not answering to the manager. It was answering to her. No one spoke right away. The silence was no longer confusion. It was realization, slow and heavy, settling into every corner of the room. The manager stood there, his hands no longer steady, his posture no longer certain, as if the ground beneath him had shifted and he had only just noticed. He glanced again at the terminal, then at the younger employee, searching for something to correct, something to fix, something to deny. Restore my access, he said, his voice sharper now, reaching for authority that had already slipped through his fingers. The younger employee did not move. He did not even look at the keyboard. I cannot, he replied, his voice firm for the first time. It is not up to the branch anymore. That sentence changed everything. Not loud, not dramatic, but final. The teller took another step back, her earlier confidence completely gone now, replaced by something quieter, something closer to fear of being wrong in a way she could not undo. The woman by the window shifted her stance, no longer just watching but fully absorbing, her eyes fixed on Vanessa, as if trying to understand how someone so calm could hold so much control without raising her voice even once. The man in the tailored suit crossed his arms slowly, nodding once, almost to himself, as if confirming something he had suspected but had not yet seen proven. Vanessa remained still, her presence unchanged, but now the stillness carried weight. Not silence. Authority. The manager turned back to her again, his voice no longer composed, no longer certain. If this is some kind of escalation, he said, choosing his words carefully now, it is unnecessary. We can resolve this professionally. Professionally. The words sounded different now. Hollow. Late. Vanessa looked at him for a long moment, not with anger, not with satisfaction, but with clarity. You had that option, she said quietly. A pause. 9 minutes ago. The number landed without explanation, but everyone in the room felt it. Time had been measured, not wasted, used. The system behind the counter shifted again. Another alert. Larger. More visible. The younger employee leaned forward, reading silently this time, then slowly leaned back, his face changing in a way that could not be hidden. Sir, he hesitated, then corrected himself. Your managerial status has been suspended pending review. The words did not echo. They did not need to. The manager did not respond immediately. He could not, because the title he had been standing on had just been removed beneath him. The teller's breath caught slightly, her eyes widening as she looked at him, then at Vanessa, then back at the screen, trying to understand how quickly everything had reversed. Vanessa reached forward slowly, picking up her identification card once more, sliding it back into her bag with a calm, deliberate motion. No rush, no reaction, just completion. Then she looked up again, her gaze steady, her voice even. You thought this was about access, she said. About whether I could reach my account. A brief pause. It never was. The room held still. She took one small breath, then continued, her tone unchanged but her words cutting deeper than anything said before. It was about whether you believed I belonged here at all. No one moved. No one interrupted. Because every person in that space knew exactly what she meant. The manager lowered his gaze for the first time, not in defeat, but in the quiet recognition that the situation had never been under his control. And Vanessa Cole stood there, not louder, not higher, just exactly where she had always been, while everything else adjusted around her. The room did not recover. It could not. Because what had just been said did not belong to the moment. It belonged to something deeper, something older, something every person there recognized, even if they had never said it out loud. Vanessa Cole stood still, her hands relaxed at her sides, her posture unchanged, but the space around her had completely shifted. She was no longer being evaluated. She was the standard everything else was now being measured against. The manager kept his gaze lowered for a moment longer than expected, then slowly looked up again, but the confidence that once filled his expression was gone. In its place was something quieter, something more careful. There has been a misunderstanding, he said, choosing each word with visible effort, as if precision might undo what had already been set in motion. We can correct this. Vanessa did not interrupt him. She let him finish. Let him attempt to reshape the narrative into something manageable, something smaller. When he stopped, she held his gaze for a long second, then spoke, her voice calm, measured, but carrying a weight that settled into the room instantly. You are right, she said. A pause, just enough for hope to flicker across his face. There was a misunderstanding. The flicker did not last. You misunderstood who you were dealing with, she continued. The sentence did not rise. It did not need to. Behind the counter, the system shifted again. Another alert, this time accompanied by a soft tone that repeated twice, signaling completion of something final. The younger employee leaned forward, reading silently, then sat back slowly, his eyes moving toward Vanessa with a kind of quiet recognition that had not been there before. Audit phase 1 complete, he said under his breath, almost to himself. The teller looked at him, then at the screen, her expression tightening as she realized this was not stopping, not pausing, not reversing. It was progressing. The woman near the window took a small step closer, no longer concerned about being discreet. She was witnessing something real, something immediate, something that did not happen often enough to look away from. The man in the tailored suit nodded once again, slower this time, as if acknowledging the weight of what was unfolding. Vanessa shifted her gaze slightly, not away, but across the room, taking in the faces, the reactions, the quiet adjustments happening in real time. Then she looked back at the manager. You asked me to explain myself, she said. To justify my presence. To prove I belonged in a space you assumed I did not. Each phrase landed clean, controlled, final. The manager opened his mouth slightly, then closed it again. There was nothing he could say that would not sound like retreat. Vanessa continued, her tone unchanged, but her words sharper now, not in volume, but in truth. And you did it publicly, she added. In front of your staff. In front of your clients. A pause. Not for effect. For clarity. That matters. The room held still again. Not tense. Not chaotic. Just aware. Fully aware. Behind the counter, the younger employee's screen refreshed one more time. He leaned in, then froze, his voice barely above a whisper. Phase 2 initiated. The words did not echo. They did not need to. Because whatever came next was no longer about correcting a mistake. It was about responding to it. And Vanessa Cole stood there, exactly where she had been from the start, not louder, not higher, but undeniable, as the system prepared to answer for everything that had just happened. Phase 2 did not arrive with noise. It arrived with precision. The system did not flash or fail. It tightened. It narrowed. It focused. Behind the counter, every screen updated at once, not chaotically, but in sequence, like a controlled chain reaction moving through the entire branch. The younger employee leaned forward again, his eyes scanning rapidly, his breathing slower now, steadier, like he understood this was no longer confusion but process. Legal oversight engaged, he read quietly, the words carrying further than he intended. The manager stiffened. That word did not belong to routine operations. Legal meant consequence, not possibility. Certainty. The teller's hand dropped fully to her side now, no longer pretending to participate, no longer part of the system she had just defended minutes ago. She looked at the manager, waiting, expecting direction, but none came. Because there was none left to give. Vanessa remained still, her presence unchanged, but the room had shifted entirely around her. She was no longer reacting to the system. The system was responding to her. The manager cleared his throat, his voice quieter now, careful, measured in a way it had not been before. "We can resolve this internally," he said, choosing words that sounded safer than they felt. "There is no need for escalation beyond this branch." Vanessa looked at him for a long moment, her expression calm, her gaze steady, but something in her eyes had sharpened. Not anger, not frustration, finality. "You escalated it," she said softly. "The moment you decided I needed to prove something you never asked anyone else to prove." The sentence landed clean. No emphasis, no raised tone, just truth, placed exactly where it could, not be avoided. The woman near the window nodded slowly, almost unconsciously, as if the words confirmed something she had been feeling since the moment this began. The man in the tailored suit exhaled again, quieter this time, his posture no longer guarded, but attentive, like he was witnessing a conclusion already in motion. Behind the counter, another alert appeared, larger than the last. The younger employee leaned back slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Branch activity under review." All transactions paused. The room felt it immediately, not as a disruption, as a shift in control. The manager's eyes widened slightly, just enough to reveal the weight of what that meant. This was no longer about one interaction. This was the entire branch. Every action, every decision, every assumption. Vanessa reached for her phone again, not urgently, not dramatically, just confirming what she already knew. A message appeared. She read it in silence, then lowered the device. That was all. The confirmation did not need to be spoken. It was already visible in the room. She looked back at the manager, her voice calm, steady, and impossibly controlled. "You said this was about procedure," she continued. "About protecting the institution." A pause. "This is what that looks like." The manager did not respond. He could not. Because the institution he thought he was protecting was now examining him instead. The teller shifted her weight, her eyes moving between Vanessa and the screens, her earlier certainty replaced by something quieter, something closer to realization. The younger employee sat still, his hands resting in his lap now, no longer part of the process, just a witness to it. Vanessa took a small breath, then added, her tone unchanged but her words carrying further than anything said before. "Accountability does not arrive loudly," she said. "It arrives when the system stops asking questions and starts answering them." The room held still, not tense, not chaotic, just aware, fully aware. And as the system continued to move, precise and controlled, every person in that space understood one thing clearly. This was no longer about what had happened. It was about what would happen next. The system did not pause. It advanced, quietly, relentlessly, like a process that had already been decided long before anyone in that room realized they were part of it. Another alert appeared, not flashing, not urgent, just present, stretching across the primary terminal in clean, unmistakable text. "Administrative review complete." The younger employee leaned forward slowly, his eyes scanning each word as if reading it too fast might change it. It did not. Nothing changed. Not anymore. "Final actions pending," he said softly, his voice carrying further than he intended. The manager did not move at first. He stood there, still facing Vanessa, but no longer seeing her the way he had 9 minutes earlier. The assumptions were gone. The certainty was gone. What remained was something far less comfortable. Awareness. He opened his mouth slightly, then closed it again, as if realizing too late that anything he said now would not shape the outcome. Because the outcome was no longer negotiable. The teller shifted again, her posture smaller now, her hands clasped together as if trying to hold on to something stable in a room that no longer offered it. She glanced toward the manager, waiting for direction that would not come, then looked back at Vanessa, her expression no longer guarded, but uncertain, almost searching. Vanessa stood exactly where she had been from the beginning. No movement, no raised voice, No demand, just presence. And that presence had reshaped everything. She lifted her phone once more, not to initiate, not to trigger, but to confirm. A final message appeared. She read it once. That was enough. She lowered the device slowly, her gaze returning to the manager. "This is the part most people misunderstand," she said calmly. The room leaned in without moving. "They think power is loud," she continued, "that it needs to announce itself." A brief pause. "It does not." Behind the counter, the system updated again. The younger employee inhaled sharply this time, unable to contain the reaction. "Termination protocol authorized," he read, his voice barely steady. The words did not echo. They settled. Heavy. Final. The manager's shoulders dropped. Not dramatically, not visibly enough for everyone to notice, but enough. Enough to show that whatever position he had been standing in was no longer there. The teller's eyes widened, her breath catching as she looked from the screen to the manager, then back again, trying to process what could not be undone. The woman near the window did not raise her phone again. She did not need to. This moment did not require documentation. It required witnessing. The man in the tailored suit nodded once more, slower this time, his expression no longer curious, but resolved, as if confirming something about the world that had just been demonstrated in front of him. Vanessa took a small step back from the counter, not retreating, not disengaging, just creating space, like someone stepping away from something that had already concluded. She looked at the manager one last time, her voice steady, her tone unchanged. "You asked me to prove who I was," she said. A pause. "I never needed to." Another breath. Quiet. Controlled. The system did it for me. The room did not respond. It could not. Because in that moment, every person there understood the same thing at the same time. This was never about a transaction. It was about a test. And the results were already in. The final alert did not sound different. It did not need to. By the time it appeared, the room already understood what it meant. The system was no longer building toward a decision. It had reached one. The main terminal refreshed slowly, deliberately, as if even the software recognized the weight of what it was about to display. The younger employee leaned forward again, but this time he did not read immediately. He just stared, his eyes fixed, his posture still, as if giving the moment the respect it demanded. Then, quietly, almost reverently, he spoke. Managerial access revoked. Employment status terminated effective immediately. The words settled into the room like gravity. No echo. No reaction at first. Just stillness. The manager did not move. His hands, once so certain, now hung at his sides without direction, without purpose. He looked at the screen, then at Vanessa, then back again, as if trying to locate the exact moment where control had slipped beyond recovery. But there was no single moment. It had been happening the entire time. The teller's breath caught softly, her shoulders drawing inward, her confidence gone completely now, replaced by the quiet realization that she had been part of something she did not fully understand. She looked down at the counter, then back at Vanessa, her expression no longer defensive, but unsettled, as if replaying every word she had said just minutes earlier. Across the room, the woman near the window exhaled slowly, her posture relaxing just enough to show that the tension had shifted into something else. Not relief. Recognition. The man in the tailored suit uncrossed his arms, his stance more open now, his gaze steady, like he was witnessing not just an outcome, but a correction. Vanessa Cole did not move forward. She did not step into the space that had just been cleared. She remained exactly where she was, her presence unchanged, her expression calm, controlled, and complete. She reached into her bag once more, not urgently, not dramatically, just with the same deliberate motion she had carried from the beginning. She placed her phone back inside, the action quiet, almost ceremonial, like closing a chapter that no longer needed to be read again. Then she looked at the manager, not with triumph, not with satisfaction, but with clarity. "This did not happen because you were wrong," she said softly. A pause. "It happened because you were certain you were right." The sentence landed deeper than anything before it, because it did not accuse. It explained. Behind the counter, the system stabilized. No more alerts. No more updates. Just a steady, quiet interface, as if nothing had ever been disrupted at all. But everything had changed. The younger employee sat back fully now, his hands resting in his lap, no longer part of the process, just someone who had witnessed it unfold from beginning to end. The teller stood still, her eyes no longer searching for direction, but absorbing the reality of what had just taken place. Vanessa took a small breath, then added, her voice even, her tone unwavering. You did not question my account, she said. You questioned my place. A final pause. Not for effect. For truth. And the system answered you. The room did not respond. It did not need to. Because in that moment, every person there understood exactly what had been proven. Not loudly, not forcefully, but completely. And Vanessa Cole, without raising her voice even once, had done more than shut down a conversation. She had shut down the assumption behind it. No one rushed to fill the silence. There was nothing left to add, nothing left to correct, nothing left to defend. The room had already absorbed everything it needed to understand. Vanessa Cole stood there for one final moment, not as someone who had won, but as someone who had revealed something that had always been there. The system behind the counter was quiet now, steady, almost indifferent again, as if it had simply done its job and moved on. But the people in the room had not. They could not. Because what they had just witnessed was not a disruption. It was a reflection. The manager remained still, his posture no longer defined by position or authority, but by the absence of both. He looked at the counter, then at the floor, then finally back at Vanessa, but there was no challenge left in his gaze. Only understanding, arriving too late to change anything. The teller stood quietly, her hands clasped in front of her, her earlier certainty replaced by something softer, something unsettled, as if she was seeing the space she worked in for the first time without assumptions guiding her. The younger employee glanced at Vanessa once more, not with confusion, not with fear, but with respect, quiet and unspoken, the kind that forms when someone witnesses truth unfold without resistance. Across the room, the woman who had been recording lowered her phone completely, letting it rest at her side. She did not need the video anymore. She had seen enough. The man in the tailored suit gave a slight nod, not to anyone in particular, but to the moment itself, as if acknowledging that something had just been corrected in a way that did not happen often enough. Vanessa took a small step back, then another, not hurried, not hesitant, just moving forward in a different direction. She did not look back at the screens. She did not look back at the counter. She did not need to. Everything that needed to be said had already been said without being raised above a calm voice. As she reached the entrance, the glass doors reflected her image briefly. The same simple clothing, the same quiet presence, unchanged from when she had walked in. But the meaning behind it was no longer invisible. She paused for a fraction of a second, just enough to let the room settle completely behind her, then stepped forward and exited into the daylight beyond. Inside, the bank remained standing. The counters were still polished. The systems were still running. The structure had not collapsed. But something else had. The assumption that presence equals permission. The belief that authority can be judged at a glance. The quiet confidence that bias can hide behind procedure without consequence. Vanessa Cole did not raise her voice. She did not demand recognition. She did not ask for fairness. She simply allowed the truth to unfold, and when it did not shout. It did not argue. It corrected. And as the door closed behind her, the room she left behind did not return to what it had been. Because once something like that is seen clearly, it does not disappear. It stays. It reshapes. It reminds. And somewhere between the silence and the system, a single truth remained, steady and undeniable. She did not need to prove who she was. She became the proof.